webinar on immunity and infection in the context of a pandemic. Extreme pleasure that today we have Dr. Nimesh Gupta, Head of Immunology Laboratory, National Institute of Immunology, New Delhi, with to discuss on this extremely important topic. I have welcome you, sir. We also have Dr. I.V. Basavaraddi, Director Muraji Desai, National Institute of Yoga, New Delhi with us. Welcome, sir. We have Mohammed Balan, Communication and Documentation Officer, Srimati Seema Sagarji, ARO Yoga. साई राष्ट्रीय योग संस्थान विकास आप सभी का इस वेबिनार में बहुत बहुत स्वागत है। अब इस कार्यक्रम की औपचारिक शुरुआत के प्रार्थना हेतु मैं श्रीमती सीमा सागर जी को आमंत्रित करती हूँ। सीमा जी,
आप अनम्यूट करें, अनम्यूट करो, अनम्यूट करें मैडम, अनम्यूट करें। ओके, अनम्यूट करें। अगेन अनम्यूट। हाँ, यस।
एक ओंकार प्रार्थना। सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः। ॐ पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते। ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः।
now I would like to invite Mohammed Balan ji for welcome address. Sir, unmute your mic, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Mandana. Good evening to all. Murarji Desai, National Institute of Yoga, conducts talk or orientation lecture by inviting experts of yoga and modern medicine on regular basis. MDNIY has been conducting yoga for immunity lectures and sessions on Ahar, Vihar, and Nidra as part of AYUSH for Immunity campaign of the Ministry of AYUSH, Government of India. In today's sessions, we have a wonderful opportunity to know many things about immunity and infection in the midst of a pandemic. Today we have with us respected Dr. Nimesh Gupta, sir, head of the Vaccine Immunology Laboratory at the National Institute of Immunology, New Delhi. Dr. Nimesh, sir, is a world-renowned biologist and immunologist. He is also the recipient of many national and international awards. Sir, to have an experts like you, especially from the field of immunity, which is a great demand now, considering the pandemic condition of COVID-19. on behalf of Murarji Desai Institute of Yoga and my own behalf, it's my privilege to welcome you, sir.
Thank you.
I extend my warm welcome to Dr. Basavaraddi, sir, Director, Murarji Desai Institute of Yoga, Ministry of AYUSH, Government of India. Director, sir, is a guiding force for such innovative programs which are need of the hour. Because of his continuous guidance, we are able to bring such programs before the public. I also welcome Dr. Vandana, Srimati Seema Sagar, Ms. Amrita, and all the staff of the Institute who are associated with us and promoting our programs through social media. Thank you.
Now I would like to invite Dr. IV Basavaraddi, our his introductory remarks. Sir.
Om Shant Shant Shanti. Professor Nimesh Gupta ji, an eminent scholar in the field of immunology. My colleagues in the institute, Shri Tayab ji, Dr. Vandana, Srimati Seema, Amrita, and other colleagues who have joined this webinar, weekly webinar, and also my all friends who are joining with us with the different social media platforms across the globe. My pranams to you all and hearty welcome to you all of you. Before I just introduce our today's the scholar and the subject, just to inform you that whenever we start this webinar, Ayush Ministry's direction to start this video of 1 minute. We have to follow the guidelines and wear the mask and wash the hands, and also keep the distance of 2 feet always. This is the one guidelines Ayush Ministry. Before we start any webinar, we should start with that video of 1 minute to sensitize the general public about the importance of these three in containing the deadly disorders. Professor Sir, for your information, Ministry of AYUSH in consultation with Niti Aayog and other agencies has taken many steps to contain the pandemic since from the February, March until today. Now from last 3 months, we have chosen 3 topics: diet and nutrition, and lifestyle or exercise, and the sleep. These are the 3 important things we identified, which are help us to improve our immunity and fight the pandemic. Therefore, the first month September was dedicated to diet and nutrition. This month October is dedicated to yoga, exercise, lifestyle, and next month is dedicated to the importance of quality sleep. So we have taken. So on this aspect, being a premier yoga institute, we are conducting many programs throughout the day. Morning we have a live yoga classes from very national reputed experts, and every Friday we are conducting this orientation lectures by eminent scholars like you. And this series, you are the youngest, and those who spoke in the last 4 or 5 webinars, they are all very healthy, 88 years young age. So very eminent scholars of 88 years, and contributed a lot in their life for the society and earned a good name as a educationist and worked in different capacities and have been recipients of president awards and many more like that. So I hope so. First of all, before introducing you, and you are also having in this young age you achieved many milestones in your life. From our institute, we wish you and such a uh, uh, wonderful career you have had, and you also contribute society and earn a name, and wish you all the best from our institute and my behalf. I'm very happy to introduce today's my esteemed guest speaker. Dr. Nimesh Gupta ji is heading the Vaccine Immunology Laboratory at the very prestigious National Institute of Immunology, New Delhi. For your information, we have taken up one research project almost on Monday. We are going to start that project. So, and Nimesh ji, Professor Nimesh ji is our advisor and also our co-investigator in the project. Dr. Nimesh ji is a virologist and immunologist by training. He was trained for virology and immunology at the Institute of Pasteur and the University Paris and Marie Curie, Paris, France. Dr. Nimesh is now leading a team interested in understanding the immunological determinants responsible for the establishment of long-term protective immunology. The major focus of investigations is to explore the biology of CD4 T cells in controlled human vaccine and virus infections. The long-term goal of this laboratory is to identify and harness the positive attributes of CD4 T cells, particularly follicular T helper cells, for the rational designing of human vaccine. That's the important. The whole world is behind to establish the vaccine, and Institute and Professor Nilesh is doing a wonderful contribution in this regard. Dr. Nimesh received global recognition as the Martin Villar Fellow for his approach of utilizing the positive attributes of CD4 T cells in treating human autoimmune diseases like hemophilia and diabetes. He has received several awards from prominent international societies for his contribution in the field of T cell immunology and for the advancement of vaccinology, like European Federation of Immunological Societies, the American Association of Immunologists, and the Mariex Foundation. In extensive collaboration with the multiple national and international institutes across the globe, Dr. Nimesh has established a cutting-edge human immunology and T-cell immunoprofiling platform at the National Institute of Immunology. The human immunology programs in Dr. Nimesh's lab has been generously supported by several funding agencies like Department of Biotechnology, Department of Science and Technology, Indo-USA Human Immunophenotyping Consortium, Indo-French Center for Promotion of Advanced Research, National Biopharma Mission, Biotechnology Industry Research Assistant Council, and DST, intensification of research in high priority areas, and many more. I'm just condensing here. And I have read some of his articles on the prominent journals, and many articles or research papers has been published in the peer-reviewed indexed high impact journals. And Dr. Nimesh has received serve as an expert in the field of viral immunology for several academic and pharmaceutical organizations. With these few introductory remarks, I once again welcome Professor Nimesh Gupta ji, and he is very kind enough accepted our invitation in a very short notice. I do know that nowadays how much busy schedule they have, but I want him because he's the right person to guide, because the whole concept of 3 months we talk about immunity, immunology, vaccine, etc. Under this condition, he is the right person to address our entire faculty and students and the yoga lovers. Now coming to the topic, today topic is and little bit of every week of our main is yoga and plus, but today immunity and infection is the main, and we'll take up the detoxification processes, energization processes in yoga. They are also there, but whenever a scientist talks and he needs evidence before him. So whatever the available evidences, I do hope that Professor Nimesh will touch upon. Today he will talk on the topic immunity and infection in the context of a pandemic. In this webinar, we will discuss about the basic aspects and the crucial components of immune system that are implicated in the fight against a pathogen. We will utilize virus infection as the model to understand the traits of ideal protective immune responses. The webinar will also cover the origin and dynamics of pandemic and the emphasis on the human health and lifestyle. Most importantly, what we are talking about lifestyle of whole month. Importantly, we'll discuss the hypothesis and demonstrated benefits of physical activities like yoga practices, particularly asanas. Yoga, one aspect of yoga is yogasana, that is covering the physical aspect. Yoga has several dimensions, and we'll discuss that in improving the strength of immune system and protective immune responses. I will not take much time, and it is my privilege once again introduce my today's guest and also welcome all of you for this webinar. Now I invite Professor Nimesh Gupta ji to deliver his talk, and he has sufficient time, take his own time, and all our students and faculty and my yoga lovers across the globe are very fortunate and love to listen to you and lectures. Professor Nimesh Gupta ji.
Thank you very much, Dr. Basavaraddi. I think it's a fantastic opportunity to discuss, with such an eminent faculty who is coming from a yoga, practices background, because that's a very important aspects of our life, particularly when we talk about lifestyle. And I think there is a lot needs to be done, to understand this interdisciplinary aspect of the yoga and the so. Without going more in details here, I will just start my talk. I'll share the screen. Okay, so I hope the screen is visible to everyone now.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so today's topic, as Dr. Ishwar has already detailed about, is on the immunity and infection, and we will try to talk, in context of the pandemic. So here is the outline of today's talk. So we will talk about basics of the immune system. So I have configured the details, particularly for for your institute and the colleagues at the Morarji Desai Yoga Center, so that we can actually discuss the very basic aspects of the immune system. We'll discuss about how the immune system works in a very fundamental basis. The immune response to virus, which is very important now, everyone has to understand. So I will touch upon the immune response to viruses. We'll discuss about origin and dynamics of pandemic, and of course we will have few discussion on strengthening the immune system. Particularly, we will take an example of the exercise and yoga. Though I'm not from that particular background or the field of yoga or the exercise, but of course there is quite a lot evolution which we have seen from past almost 100 years now on the impact of exercises and other physical activities on the immune system. So I will try to discuss on that part, and I'll also keep on few of my understanding that what can be done so that that this particular field of exercise immunology, or let's say the yoga immunology, can be taken up. And with that, we will have some key takeaways from this talk. So to start with the basics of the immune system. So in our life, we are exposed to a plethora of pathogens, and we see them, from the time of birth, then to the childhood, and to the whole, the phase of life from adult to the aging. What happens is we develop the immune responses to these pathogens in multiple ways. The one way is something where we get the infection and we get sick. And then this sickness, we recover from the sickness, of course, because of the kind of a very organized and balanced responses from the immune system. And that led to the development of memory. I think everyone after this pandemic has learned a few of these terms, particularly the immunological memory, the immunity. These things are very, very important. So immunological memory, which comes after the sickness or after the disease or after the clinical manifestation, is something which we believe that in case of natural infection, it persists for long. In some cases, it may be lifelong. However, we also develop the immunological memory, without even having the sickness. And this is something which we now these days are understanding as asymptomatic infections. So in both the ways, when we see the pathogen, we develop this memory, we develop the immune responses, and we actually are able to recognize that pathogen most of the times in our whole life. This particular, the protection, the memory is the consequence, or I will say it's the outcome of our immune system. The immune system, which is an organization of organs, cells, and the proteins, which actually coincide, which actually orchestrate together to give a very balanced and extraordinary control of any, of any foreign invasion, whether it's a pathogen or it's an allergen. So where this immune system, works about, how it starts, where it starts, what are the, the workhouses. So to explain you in very brief details here is, in our body, we have multiple, the lymphoid organs, which are known as primary lymphoid organs or the secondary lymphoid organs. So the primary lymphoid organs like thymus and the bone marrow, they are actually responsible for maturation of the immune cells, particularly T cells and the B cells. We'll touch upon that part as well. However, other than these two, there are the organs like spleen or the lymph nodes, several lymph nodes, which we call as, somewhere from tonsils or adenoids, which are actually spread throughout the body at different locations. These are the one where this immune response and the immune interaction between the different cell components of the immune system takes place, and where the outcome of that immune response is actually decided. If just for an example, you see this adenoid, which we sometimes say the tonsil, in these lymphoid organs, you see it's a very microanatomical structures where the different kind of cells like T cells, the B cells, or the innate immune cells, which actually interacts. And they have different compartments inside these lymphoid organs where they have the migration and where they have the interaction with the different immune cells. And this whole process, of the interaction of the cells in lymphoid organs takes a due course, which depends on the intensity of the immune response, the intensity of the immune reaction, and of course on the pathogen interaction with the host, and is the place where the whole memory is actually constituted. The memory responses are actually devised. So when we talk about the immune system, we of course talk about two different compartments of the immune system. One which is called as the innate immune compartment, and another which is called as the adaptive immune compartment. So we have two different ways to actually handle the foreign pathogen.
So very first which attacks on the foreign pathogen just after the entry inside our body is the innate immune compartment. And it's very important. It starts with physical barriers, like we have skin, the gastrointestinal tract, the respiratory tract, the cilia inside that respiratory tract, and the nasopharynx, and even the irises. So these are all the physical barriers which starts at the very first step. Then comes to the defenses again, which comes into the innate immune compartments, which are known as like mucus, the wax inside our ears, the bile, or the saliva, even the tears. These are the defensive production from our body, which comes into this innate defenses and which are the first line of defense for any foreign pathogen. However, in the innate immunity, the innate immune compartments, they are non-specific to any pathogen. Non-specific means they do not recognize that pathogen if it comes again. So if it comes once or twice, in both the times, they will recognize it as a foreign and they will actually attack at the same way, rather than having the differences in the magnitude of response. In that way, this becomes very important because they are quick. So that is the most important aspect of the innate immune compartment, that they immediately act against anything which is foreign to the body. And that is required because in the very first instance, you need a quick attack on a foreign pathogen which enters the body. However, that is not sufficient. So to have something which we call memory, which can actually help recognizing the pathogen if it comes in future, is called adaptive immune compartments. And these adaptive immune compartments are including the two most important cell types, like B cells, those who produce antibodies and are responsible for constituting the humoral immunity. The T cells, which are responsible for cell-mediated immunity, and they, of course, are the one those who establish the humoral immunity with the B cell help. Adaptive immune compartments, the adaptive immunity, highly specific. So major difference between the innate and adaptive. Non-specific in case of innate, quick. However, adaptive is highly specific. It recognizes the structures on the pathogen. It recognizes and remembers. And that remembrance is something which we call it immune memory. So this immune memory is something which is the bona fide, or which is a kind of trait of the adaptive immunity, and which is very necessary and essential when we talk about any pathogen and infectious diseases. And this is what the whole vaccine domain is actually trying to work upon, to have something which can give us a long-lasting memory to protect against several infectious diseases. So in these immune compartments, they have different cell types. So both of them have a very unique subsets of immune cells, those who have specialized functions. And for example, here in the innate immune compartments, we have dendritic cells, macrophages, neutrophils, and many other granulocytes. And in case of the adaptive immune compartments, as I have told, we have mostly the B cells and the T cells. In T cells, we have two different subsets, CD4 and the CD8 T cells. So B cells, as we know in the adaptive immune compartments, they are known to produce the antibodies. T cells are the ones those who have like two different subsets of CD4 and CD8. CD4 cells are required to provide help to the B cells so that they can actually produce a good quality antibodies. And the CD8 T cells do have roles in doing the cytotoxicity. They are the killer T cells that we know, including the NK T cells. When we talk about these compartments on the innate immunity, dendritic cells and the macrophages, they are playing a very crucial role on connecting the innate responses to the adaptive immunity. So the dendritic cells are the ones those who actually present the pathogen after chopping it in different very small fragments, and then show it to the T cells so that they can actually recognize and then present it to the B cells to produce the antibodies. So this crosstalk between the innate immune compartment and the adaptive immune compartment is the basis of the good quality immune responses, and is the basis for establishing the immunological memory. So this is an example that how the different subsets from innate and adaptive immune compartment can actually orchestrate and can actually organize themselves to provide an immune response against a single pathogen. And of course, this is a very complex process. So with this information that what are the basic aspects in the immune system, and how the immune system is organized, and how these two different compartments cross-talk to each other, we will now discuss on how immune system works, and we will actually look into those aspects which are very important for an action of the immune system against any foreign pathogen. So I will discuss about three different methods, the three different processes of the immune system which they utilize to actually destruct a pathogen, which includes both the innate and the adaptive immune compartments. One of them is called the phagocytosis, which is mostly driven by the innate immune compartment, the direct killing of infected cells, which now have the need of the innate compartment to cross-talk to the adaptive compartments, and then to tell them, okay, this is what the pathogen structure looks like. You have to recognize it on the cells and then see if you can help killing those cells which are infected with the pathogen. Or an example here we'll take as a virus. And the third process is antibody-mediated clearance. So how the antibodies which are produced by the B cells are actually helping in clearing the pathogen. This is what we will discuss in these three slides. So very first, the phagocytosis. It's nothing. It's just like an innate immune cell, like neutrophils or the macrophages, and they eat the pathogen. Just they swallow the pathogen by a process which we call as the phagocytosis. So it's a direct swallowing of the pathogen. And then, of course, the further process which includes in these cells is they kill these pathogens. So after they eat it, they kill it by several enzymes what they have inside them. And this also helps in processing these, the pathogens, and then to chop their whole proteins into the small fragments called peptides, and then present them to the T cells so that they can actually start the adaptive immune responses. So this is an important aspect. It's a very important process of the first the attack of the immune system on the pathogen. The second that we were discussing is the direct cell killing. Now this is something which needs both the innate and the adaptive immune compartments to actually come together and then to find out the cells which are actually infected with the pathogen. So here an example is the virus. So let's say you have a cell which is infected with the virus. So virus goes inside the cell and it replicates, and then there are possibilities that it's while replicating it has been also attacked by the cellular responses, and then you have different smaller proteins, as I told, the peptides, which from the virus, the whole over polyprotein are chopped and then presented on the cell. So there are receptors on those cells which can take these proteins from inside, come on the top, and then just present it so that the cytotoxic T cells can recognize it, and then they can see, oh yes, this is the cell which has been infected by the viruses, because the cell is showing and presenting those peptides. What happens is that this peptide, which is loaded on some of the receptors, which we call MHCs, the major histocompatibility complexes, are recognized by the T cells, the killer T cells. They come, they see it, and they then start producing some of the cytotoxic molecules. Okay, I will not get into those details. Those cytotoxic molecules then actually induce the death of that particular cell. And what happens is that it actually contains two different ways. One, it does not allow the cell to provide more, the nutrition or to provide the more energy to the virus to replicate and then to spread and to disseminate. First. Second, it actually compresses all the viruses in those cells. So there is another way that these cells, after death, will not allow further dissemination of virus, even from the dead compartment, from the dead cells. So this is a very efficient way of killing the virus-infected cells when it comes to the virus infections, like even now what we are seeing in case of the pandemic. And it of course needs both the innate and the adaptive immune compartment to actually work in a super harmony and to actually work very efficiently so that they can actually clear the virus very quickly without having it spread throughout the body. The another process which is a very important and intense process and which actually takes a course. It's a two different steps which takes place when we talk about the antibody responses. And as we know that these antibodies are definitely required in a long term to have and to establish a kind of long-term persistent protective immunity. So mostly these antibodies are secreted by the B cells, and these B cells actually recognize some of the epitopes and the structures on the virus, and they secrete these antibodies, which can then help two different ways. One, it can actually bind the virus on those epitopes and then can clear the virus without allowing it to interact with the cells so that the virus cannot enter inside the cell, and then you have this virus which is cleared from the system. The second and the very efficient way is, which includes both the antibodies as well as the innate compartment, is through the antibody dependent toxicity. So what happens is these cells which secretes the antibodies, they then actually interact. So this immune complex, the virus which is immune complex with the antibody, goes down to the macrophages or the other innate immune cells. And then it actually allows the entry of this whole immune complex via some of the specific and the specialized receptors expressed on the macrophages. So this way, the antibodies actually help in clearing the virus in presence of the antibodies, which actually circulate throughout the body. And that's one way is something which is very helpful for clearing the virus in a very limited time frame. So these three different processes are something which are some way what we can say is a kind of trait, kind of a characteristic of our immune system where it can handle and destruct the pathogen. When we talk about the antibody responses, one has to understand it's the importance of the antibody responses in the different phases of infection is the basis of our vaccine responses, as well as the basis of our long-term protective immunity. And this is something which we call as the primary response and the secondary response. So the primary response is something when you first time see the pathogen and you have the antibody responses generated, which takes time. It takes time from 7 days to something like 2 weeks. And in that period, you will have the antibodies which comes out, in more magnitude, in more quantity in circulation. And then it comes something which is a secondary response when the pathogen comes again. So when it actually attacks again, what happens is that our immune system recognizes it quickly. And then that's the time when these B cells, which are now memory, can actually produce the antibodies very quickly. It's like 3 days, maximum like 4 days, and you have a huge quantity and a better quality of the antibodies that comes out. So just to tell you this, in a very small, kind of the simple terms is that you have the time limitation of at least the weeks when we have the different activation, differentiation, the profiling of the B cells leading to the antibody responses. This is a kind of the example for the primary immune responses. And when you have a secondary immune responses, it's quick. It's quick. You need less level of the differentiation and activation of the B cells as compared to the primary response. And it is something which you have a huge quantity of the antibodies, even with the good quality antibodies, which comes out in case of the secondary responses. So this is something which we actually utilize as the principle of the vaccine responses, where we would like to give the human body an experience without actually causing the infection, so that next time when they actually see and get interact with the pathogen, they immediately respond with high quality antibodies and the better memory cells, so that it can control quickly. So these are the major aspects of the immune system, that how it works. And of course, it is a complex phenomena, but here just to give you a simplified understanding on what are the major aspects and how it actually helps and how it actually orchestrates together to provide the better responses, we see these the major processes. So with this, I will then move towards the immune response to the viruses. So we will take these examples, what we are learning in the basics of the immune system and how the immune system works, what are the processes, and we will try to now understand in an overall scheme that what will happen if you have a virus which enters inside the body, how our immune system will look into it, how our immune system will actually control it, and what are the multiple steps which one can have strengthen them, which one can have a very strong or the boosted immune responses, which definitely can help to control the pathogen or as well as to control the infection. So this is an example which was nicely discussed in a review of clinical immunology, that when we talk about viruses, we know that viruses enters through different routes in our body. There are different viruses, they have different routes, they have different the pathogenesis, and of course the clinical outcome. So if we see that there are viruses that can cause the infection through the ocular infections like adenoviruses. There are respiratory tract infections, which are something which is known for causing the severe disease, and also they are the fourth topmost cause of death across the globe, and third topmost cause of death in the low and the middle income countries like India. And these respiratory tract infections are mostly caused by viruses like influenza, respiratory syncytial virus, and now we know the coronaviruses. So this group of coronavirus and what we are seeing now, the COVID-19, they all are the pathogens which actually cause infection through the respiratory tract. There are viruses, those who cause the infection through skin entry infection, the genitourinary tract, and of course the gastrointestinal tract. The purpose of showing this is there are different ways of entry. Similarly, there are also the differences in the response from the immune system at these different entities. And this is an active field to understand that if these viruses have one particular mode of entry, do they have a lower or the inferior response if we put them in a non-natural route of entry? So this is something which is also has been largely discussed in case of the COVID-19. As we are evolving with the understanding of the virus pathogenesis, we will definitely learn more about this virus in future. So when we talk about this virus infection and immunity, here is something which I would like to explain to the colleagues at this institute is there are multiple variants of the immune system which one can strengthen by multiple ways that can actually help in controlling the infection, and this is something which is very host specific. So I will give you a detailed scheme here that how it works. So let's say you have a first step of the transmission. So you have a virus which has to transmit to an individual, and in this transmission phase, something which helps protecting the exposure of an individual to the virus are the physical barriers. As we discussed, the skin, the different tracts, the respiratory tract, the nasopharyngeal tracts, and the ciliars, and also the different mucus and even some of the secretory tracts. So these are the ones those who can actually help that, okay, in the very initial step, the exposure stage, we actually control the virus not to even get entered inside the body. In the second step, if we have the virus, which of course enters inside the body, then it tries to cause the infection. And at this stage, the very first which comes into action is the innate immunity. Innate immunity at multiple levels, like the different cell subsets like neutrophils, and the macrophages and the dendritic cells will come into action. Neutrophils will be the first to come to the site of the virus entry. And then they will secrete their enzymes and they will try to put into the traps on the virus and to kill it. And at the same time, we also have a lot of cytokines like the interferons, the interferon alpha, beta, and as well as the gamma, which secretes at this stage, and they actually help clearing the viruses at the very first instance. And this is where that it actually decides that if we have a controlled response to the virus at this stage, it actually restricts the virus to disseminate further in the body and to cause the infection. Once we have this barrier crossed, this infection, the virus will try to either, at this stage, either get controlled because of the innate immune responses, or it spreads. However, in both the ways, something which is very important, as we discussed, is the establishment of the memory responses. And to do that, at this stage, the virus has to go towards the lymphoid tissue, the transport to the lymphoid tissues. And mostly the dendritic cells are those who actually play a very crucial role here. So they carry the pathogen, they carry the virus from the site of the infection. Let's say if it's a mosquito-bitten virus, then you have the virus in the skin. The dendritic cells in the skin take it towards the lymphoid tissues. And in the lymphoid tissues, the whole process of the innate and the adaptive compartment interaction then takes place in 3 different steps. One, the pathogen can directly go through the circulation, enter into the lymphoid tissues, and interact with the B cells. This is the first step where the activation of the adaptive immunity takes place, and the B cells gets activated and immediately secrete some antibodies. Though these antibodies come quick, they are not very good quality, and they are not of also very high affinity to the virus structure. But they are important because they can, by virtue of binding towards the multiple epitopes, the ability is higher, it can actually help clearing the virus quickly. So this is the first response which comes in the lymphoid compartments once the virus is spread towards the lymphoid tissue. In the second step, these dendritic cells take this virus, interact with the T helper cells. And now these T helper cells recognize the peptides, those structures, the chalked proteins of the virus. And these specific cells, which have the specific receptor to those proteins, then gets activated. Once they get activated, they actually go and talk to the B cells. Now this interaction is the basis for establishing the high quality humoral responses, high quality antibody responses, and a better quality memory, the memory B cells. So these T helper cells interact with the B cells, which then allow these B cells to select, activate, differentiate into the different subsets of the B cells, which are known for secreting the antibodies, and then they produce the good quality antibodies also in the higher quantity. In the same place, at the same time, these all processes are happening simultaneously, okay? So at the same time, what happens, the third thing is the same dendritic cells process that protein, chop it nicely inside the cell, present the different parts on the top, on the surface, and then they actually interact with the killer T cells, like cytotoxic CD8 T cells. Cytotoxic CD8 T cells recognize it, and then they get to the bug, they go to the site of infection, and they start seeing those cells which do have the similar kind of proteins or the peptides expressed on the surface. So this is how this process now will become higher in magnitude in quantum and becomes very important to go and quickly attack the cells in the periphery wherever the virus has actually infected the cells. In that way, it actually starts controlling the virus infection and the virus dissemination. So this is something which we call as an infection control, the stage where we know that if we have a good quality antibodies and if we have a good memory, definitely we will be able to control the infection, and this will remain for a long time, the specific antibodies, the cell-mediated immunity, and the immune memory. So these 3 compartments will stay a long term, and in most of the cases, they come up very quickly when they see the pathogen again. When I say most of the cases, there are still few cases where the memory here, this doesn't work well. And we in the immunology field are still trying to look into those aspects, which actually get into this inferior quality of the memory responses, because this is something which we do not want if we want to develop a vaccine. So this is an overall scheme of how a virus can actually invade, infect, and how our immune system can actually attack the virus and can take over the pathogen and give the remembrance or the recognition to the immune system in terms of memory. And then we are actually fine if we see that pathogen again in the next attack. So with this, we will now change our gears and we switch towards a little bit understanding on the pandemic, so that we can actually connect our understanding on the immune system, the immune responses, and the necessity in controlling the pandemics and taking it towards how we can strengthen those aspects which are actually essential to control such pandemics. So here we of course talk about how the pandemic originates, but before I get into it, I would like to share that we have been seeing these pandemics, deadly pandemics, from even the 14th century, the records available, even before that, of course. But two of these pandemics, one which was caused in 14th century, which is called as a Black Death pandemic, plague pandemic, and the second was 1918, the influenza pandemic. These two pandemics created the havoc, and that was something which was very, very hard for the societies. Like in case of the Black Death, the plague pandemic, more than 50% of the European population was completely stripped, and that has substantially affected the overall civilization and the culture system in Europe. And this was in 14th century, but even though at that time, something which they were able to understand was not, of course, the causative agent, but they were able to understand the way it spreads. And the similar aspects of social distancing and the hygiene were applied even at that time in 14th century to control the spread of that deadly pandemic. And in 1918, the influenza pandemic has hugely affected the world population. Even in India, it was like more than 20 million deaths occurred in the two different waves of the pandemic. And these two pandemics are vastly discussed when we talk about the effect of the pandemics on the civilization. And good thing is, after our understanding in the immunology and the viruses, there are enormous efforts in understanding how it has happened and what were the ways that we can control such pandemics in future. So they are now as a working model to control the pandemics in future. So with this, I would like to give you a brief information on why we call it as a pandemic and what is a pandemic. And there is a lot of confusion when we talk about the different terms like endemic, epidemic, and pandemic. So I'll just give you an idea here that if you see here in the first globe, you see the different regions in the globe, and you see these orange dots. These are the cases. Let's say these are the infections, the rate of infections, or these are the disease which is happening here, the infection which is happening here. In each location, it is specific, and this comes every year. This comes, maybe every time throughout the year. This is called endemic. An example is dengue, like in India. It's endemic for India. You see the second globe, it is very specific to one particular region, and it is vastly affected that region only. And this is because when there is a susceptible host is present in an adequate number. And this is called epidemic. It suddenly comes up. It is more than the severe cases, more than the one or two infections what we see, and we see more susceptible human hosts there. And this is what we call the epidemic. Now, the pandemic is nothing but the extensive and the spread of the epidemic across the globe. So you see third globe. So every continent, you see the disease. this is something which is called pandemic, which is an epidemic, which is spread throughout the continents, and now it becomes pandemic, which was, if you remember, in case of this recent COVID-19 pandemic, initially it was more like an epidemic for China, and then slowly it spreads, and then it was announced as a pandemic throughout the globe. To give you more information on the definition of pandemic, is it affects a wider geographical area. It's often global. It infects a very large number of people. It's often caused by a new virus or a new strain of virus that has been dormant for many years. It spreads quickly in humans, as of course there is a little existing immunity. Can cause high number of deaths. And because of the need to control the spread of this disease, there's often the social disruption and the economic loss. That's what we are experiencing these days with this ongoing pandemic. Something which is very important here to understand that how this pandemic happens. So most of these pandemics are originated actually due to the zoonotic transmission. Zoonotic means something which comes from animal to human. So the zoonotic transmissions, which are actually coming from the animals to humans, they enter into the human population, and this is how they actually cause the infection leading to the epidemic and the pandemics. And this can actually happen through both the populations of the domesticated animals or even the wildlife animals. And this is something which we have been seeing since the previous pandemics, that this is because of our introduction, the increased human-animal interaction following either the domestication or the high risk, the entry of these zoonosis like the avian influenza and all, which is actually leading to these livestock production systems, and then we are coming into their context, and then this is how it is getting into the human system, which is having no existing immunity, and it's leading to the infection and the spreads. However, there are ways where we have seen the pandemics because of deforestation or because of the mass entry of the human inside the forest and leading to this consumption of these wild species, as well as the wild animal trade, which has been an example of this COVID-19, which came out from the wet markets of China. I would like to tell you something here, which will become the basis for our discussion on the next part, that why the human immune system plays a significant role in case of the pandemics. So you see here, these are the three different circles. The pink one represents the environment. The blue one represents the host, human. The orange one represents the pathogen. There is a huge interaction, I will say a kind of imbalance that happens in between these three figures, which can actually lead to epidemic, which can actually lead to endemic, which can actually lead to the pandemic. An example here, you see the first column, the host as well as the pathogen. So there is a lacunae in the host immune system, or there is an increased interaction of the host immune system or the host with the pathogen, either through the pathogen directly or coming into the contact of some of the infectious, the feuds, like when they come into the context of infected animals, or through the bites, like mosquitoes and the vectors which are spreading infection. So this imbalance, or this more close interaction between the host and the pathogen and the susceptibility of the host, which leads to an epidemic, or which may further go towards the pandemic. And this is something which is important, because if the human immune system is strong enough to control, there are less ways that the less ways of transmission of that particular pathogen. The second column you see here, that is the environment. So which is something which we are discussing right now. Environment plays a very crucial role. An example here is an environment which allows higher humidity post-monsoon. It can actually allow the vectors to grow more, vectors like mosquitoes, and that can actually increase the mosquito-borne infections. So this imbalance and this particular factor which comes from the environment, it plays a very crucial role. And similarly, if we take an example of the environment now, when we are talking about the winter months, particularly in the northern hemisphere, for the COVID-19, there is more cold which is going to come. There will be more dry wind, and that will actually affect the overall nasopharyngeal tract or the cilias, and that will actually affect the mucus-related clearance of the virus. And that is something which we are thinking that it may actually be more negative to control the virus spread, because our system, this first variants of the innate responses may not be very efficient when they are in the dry condition. So there are actually suggestions that it's better to control the humidity, a higher humidity level to 40-50% even in the offices, so that this particular factor can be avoided and we can control the spread of this virus. So this is an example that the environmental factors play a very, very crucial role in this dynamics of the epidemics or the pandemics. And the third one you see here, it is something which is a very susceptible human host, a weak human host, which is something, let's say an example of immunosuppression. Let's say if an individual who has immunosuppressed state, he or she will not be able to control the infection, and that's where this particular pathogen will be able to transmit, infect, and then to spread to the population. So in this way, this dynamics which we see here, there is a crucial role of the immune response, the immune system, particularly in the human, which can actually avoid or which can actually control these whole dynamics and avoid having the epidemics or even leading towards the pandemic. So it's something which is very important here, that when we talk about the dynamics at all levels, at all stages, what is more important is the immune system, the way, the biology of the human, which actually controls the infection, which actually controls the pathogen. And this is well explained by this pathogen type. So, of course, the pathogens have evolved the ability to infect humans, but they do it with the different degrees. And then it will have a different impact, ranging from very minimal to the terminal level of infection. And this at every level, which is called a level 4, level 1, which is exposure, level 2, which is infection, level 3, which is transmission, and the level 4, which is an epidemic spread, is something have all the biological and the ecological barriers to avoid reaching to the level 4 or to the level 5 of the pandemic. An example here is that if you are exposed to a virus and if you have a very strong immune response or immune system or controlling that pathogen, this exposure will not lead to the infection. You see the red bars here? These red bar means it will actually give you a biological protection. Or there are also possibilities of the ecological or the environmental factors that can actually help protecting this pathogen to reach from level 1 to level 2. And most of us at this stage needs a very strong counterattack from our immune system to the pathogen. And that's why we need a very strong, the immune system at this level, so that we do not allow this pathogen to go from level 1 to the level 2. If it reaches to level 2, even it causes the infection, there are, again, those biological and ecological barriers can actually help to contain the pathogen inside the human body and can protect its transmission, so that it becomes a sporadic case, an infection in 1 in 1,000, and it does not allow the virus to transmit to the other individuals. This is something which also includes the potential or the characteristics of the virus, that how it can actually transmit, in what stage of infection it can actually transmit. And then this is something which leads to the epidemic spread. Once it reaches to the transmission stage, then of course it will have its own way where it can then spread towards the community. And again, where it includes a very strong, the contact from the immune system. If it is probably will not lead towards the pandemic. If it is not, and if the spread of the virus is something which is coming into the different levels, different stages of infection, without seeing the severity of the infection, then the chances are very low to control from this level 4 to the level 5, which reaches to the pandemic, which we have seen in case of the COVID-19, where it has started spreading even from the asymptomatic individuals, so that it's so difficult to control. So this pyramid is something which actually tells us that if you have a way, if you have your immune system strong enough, then you can actually have a way to control the start of the infection reaching to level 2 or even the level 3. And that's where the healthy lifestyle, that's where our overall the body's resistance power comes into the picture. So let's now, taking these two compartments of how immune system works and how pandemic happens, let's now discuss about what are the ways to strengthen the immune system, because at this stage, as we all are discussing the same thing, that until and unless we have the vaccines, until and unless we have something like a very efficient therapy for the ongoing pandemic, we have to have the preventive measures. And the preventive measures can, of course, include all possible things that can allow you to protect through the exposure, as well as can allow you to fight through the exposure. Of course, these things, being an immunologist, we always believe to look into the demonstrated evidences, but there is the information available which has been studied in case of the exercises, which has been studied in case of some of these physical activities, which we are going to discuss now in this part. So when we talk about strengthening the immune system, I put on a few things here. Something which is important is, of course, nutrition. You have to have a good nutrition, a balanced diet, so that you can actually empower your immune system. You give a good food to the immune system, and then it will have a better action potential. Something which comes is hygiene. Of course, we always talk about this. The hygiene and cleanliness is something which is very much required so that your immune system has a good strength. A lifestyle which, as we know that the routines, how we actually follow these sleep cycles, how we follow actually the eating, the exercise habits. Lifestyle, the mental health, particularly the stress levels, and the stress levels has been shown to connect with the virus infections. So this is something which is, and I will say an unexplored area when we connect it to the virus infections, or even when we talk about the immune responses, because it's a complex phenomena, and we only talk about the singular phenomena. We do not talk about the cross-sectional, the multi interactive profiles. When we talk about mental health, lifestyle, hygiene, nutrition, all of them will give you a very connected responses. And that is something which is actually lacking at this stage. And the exercise, of course. And when we talk about the exercise here, we will discuss now more on this part, that how the exercise has been shown to impact the immune system. So I am just giving you few the examples of the studies which has been done, very impressive studies actually. And they have actually shown you that how this exercise can actually impact the immune system. That's fantastic, and this is how it actually works. So this is a field. This is a field which is known as exercise immunology, and it's evolved like almost 100 years back. And you see, it's the evolution of this exercise immunology is fantastic. You see that it started somewhere in 1900, long way, where they started looking into the actual changes in the basic immune cell counts, just the counts at that stage, and how the exercise actually impacts the counts. It's of course important. We need the immune cells, the immune cell compartments. They are formed because of the cells. You need a good cells there, of course, in a controlled, in a balanced way. Then somewhere in 80s, it comes the flow cytometry into the picture, and then they starting respiratory illnesses because of the sportsmen, those who actually were facing a lot of respiratory illnesses. And that was a good time when they connected this, the sports and the sports activities with the immunology. And then in 1990s and until 2009, there are a lot of different aspects of nutrition, the aging, immunosenescence, and the inflammatory cytokine that started coming into the picture, and then they started understanding how this exercise is actually impacting these, the immune system, the immune responses. And now, I think 2010 onwards, we are much more complex, we are much more specialized, and we are now actually correlating this exercise into the clinical outcomes. Of course, the multi-omics approaches are now available, and there are now even the guidelines for the nutrition, so that to overcome or to enhance the impacts of the exercise. So this was actually astonishing for me, and this is something which I can also share with you, that this is not a very straightforward field, because it's a complex field. You will have a huge co-founding effects of so many other factors which will be difficult to handle and to show the direct effect of exercise on the immune system. But it has been nicely done. And what we know that there are multiple aspects which have been studied. The acute or the chronic changes. Of course, the one has to have the interest in the acute changes, because that will be very quick on the immune system after the exercise. Its clinical influences, the nutritional interactions, and the immunosenescence. These are the 4 fields which has been studied in past 10-15 years, I will say, in terms of connecting the exercise and its impact on the immunity. When it comes to exercise, it is something which is more on to the field-based, the exercises like running and the doing gymming and all. So in the acute and the chronic changes, something which has been shown that the exercise can actually enhance the innate immunosurveillance. And this is something which is important. Surveillance means you have to have your immune cells a capacity to run around in our body very quickly and very efficiently, so that whenever any pathogen comes in, they can actually immediately attack. It's like a power board there, so that you have a good exercise rhythm, you have a good power board there for the innate immune cells for the surveillance. And there has been a contrary reports which were also available, which I will also discuss in the consecutive slides, is about the immune dysfunction, the immune suppression after the heavy exercise, after the heavy exertion. That's very, very important. And I think the field still needs to know so many things about these impacts on the immune system. When we talk about the clinical influences, there is something which has been discussed is on the J-curve effect on the acute respiratory illness, the reduced systemic inflammation, and of course, its linkages to the reduced chronic diseases. As I said before, that because of so many other co-founding, the compounding factors, there has been few bias in these studies, and that's why it has not been nicely demonstrated as a direct effect of exercise on these the chronic diseases. The nutritional interactions has been nicely studied and has been shown that in terms of the exercises, something which, if you have a balanced diet, it will definitely help you in maintaining your immune responses post exercise. And of course, the immune senescence, the aging, and exercise, and effects has been shown on the aged peoples in the immune senescence conditions, that it can actually mitigate the effects of aging on the immune function. So something which is which has been studied, I will not read through the whole slide. I will just give you an extract of this. Is the acute exercise is something which can be an adjuvant for the immune system that has been proposed, and of course few of the demonstration has been done to show it as well. When I say acute exercise, is something which is a moderate level of exercise. It's not an exertion. It is like less than 1 hour of exercise, which does not give you a huge exertion. And this acute exercise has been shown to stimulate the innate immune cells to migrate between the lymphoid tissues and the blood compartments. You remember what we discussing in the initial slides, that you have to go to the lymphoid tissue, carry the pathogen there, present to the adaptive immune cells, so that you have a quick response. And this is something which can actually be stimulated by the acute exercise levels. Although it can be a transient. However, in a long course of time, there could be an improved potential of the immunosurveillance against pathogens, and that can also lead to the decreased systemic inflammation. And the studies has also shown that the stress hormones, which can actually suppress the immune cell function, actually cannot reach the high levels during the short duration exercise. So this is a multi-factorial or multi-dimensional impact of the exercise on the immune compartments, as well as reducing those stress hormones that can actually affect negatively the immune responses. And even the exercise bout is a very small level of exercise, a very time frame which is less than 30 minutes, can actually even cause a transient increase in the white blood cells. The white blood cells, what we talked about, the T cells, B cells, and other plasma cytokines, which of course include like IL-6, 8, 10, 18, and other factors like which are monocyte chemotrectin protein and all, which are very important for setting up or inducing and effective innate responses. So this is something which has been studied, but it has not been studied universally. It has not been studied in the different populations. So it is very, in my understanding, it's very difficult to establish that this is something which is going to happen in all the populations across the globe, those who are actually experiencing different demographic conditions. So it becomes important, of course, to understand these aspects, particularly in terms of our country, India, where we see a very different environment, and we should know what is happening in this particular population. And this is something which I was talking about, the heavy exertion versus the moderate exercise. This is very important because this is how, I think it is the impact is connected towards yoga. Because in my understanding, yoga is something which is a moderate exercise, which of course influences the mental health. It is not a heavy exertion. So this was a nice study done by Niemann and Wondt's group, and what they have shown that if you see here, the dark blue is the marathon race. So most of these individuals were actually studied when they completed the marathon race, okay, heavy exertion. And the light blue are just the individuals who just do the walking bout, okay, 30 minutes walk and that's all. And afterwards they were studied. Most of the places you see, everything is going down in negative, the degree and the duration of change, particularly for the adaptive immunity and the innate immunity. It is happening in case of the marathon. It's happening in case of the heavy exertion. And this is something which is not so high positive, but it's still not negative, and a balanced response, which we see in case of the walking boards. So this says that a transient, a moderate exercise is something which has a positive impact on the immune system, rather than having the exertion, which is a heavy exertion or a long-term exercise. So what this study and few other studies, concludes that immune system, it reflects the magnitude of physiological stress experienced by the exercise. So the level of stress, the level of exertion you take, there should be a threshold. You should not go beyond that, because then it may start giving you the negative impact. And that's what was initially studied in 1900 when there was a kind of proposition in the field that exercise leads to immune dysfunction. And then later it slowly recognized that exercise is not for immune dysfunction, actually the high or the heavy exertion during the exercise, which actually lead to the immune dysfunction. So it was nicely explained, by this particular scheme. If you see here, the immune surveillance, something which is for the immune cells. As we studied, the innate immune cells need to do the surveillance to do, the better migration to the lymphoid tissue so that a immune response could be potential. And sedentary, something when you do not do any exercise, and the red arrow is showing the illness risk. If you see here, in a very moderate level of the exercise or the workload, you have a less level of the illness risk and a higher immune surveillance. As you move ahead into the same scheme, into the same arrow, you see the heavy and the higher, exertion exercise, which can actually decrease the immune surveillance and can actually increase the illness risk, which can go further high with a higher stress into the physiological responses. And this is something which has been studied at the metabolic level in the immune cells, that the reason of this exertion could be because of the higher consumption of the metabolic activity, which do not allow the immune cells to act quickly because they are exhausted. They still need energy. It's the same thing, like your car needs the petrol, the cells needs the energy, they needs the metabolites to actually act. So when you exhaust it, they do not act. It could be one of the hypotheses that has been proposed in the field. Of course, it needs more evidence to go into, and to prove that particular hypothesis. And this is something which is very nicely explained, which is in this field is known as the J curve. J curve is something which tells about the differences between the heavy exertion and the moderate exercises. And you see here on the y-axis, this is the URTI risk. URTI is upper respiratory tract infection risk. Sedentary is something which is a normal status. So you see there is a normal risk for the upper respiratory tract infections. You do the moderate exercise, this risk goes down more by 40 to 50%, which is reduced. And you reach to the heavy exertion, it goes up by 6-fold. It elevates. So this is how it has been explained that exercise can actually impact the immune system, and that immune system can actually affect your capacity or your potential to actually interact or resist the pathogen or any kind of infection. So a balance is required even here in case of the exercises. So with this, I would like to just give you a slide on the yoga, because I think so I do not discuss more about the impact of the yoga on the immune system, because I believe that there are very less direct impact of yoga that has been shown, and I will come to that particular point, that what we really need to do if one has to put the evidence and demonstrate the positive impact of yoga on the immune system. But it has a huge potential. The one thing which I would like to highlight here is yoga is an example of moderate physical activity, which actually impacts the mental health. So this comes into that category of the moderate exercise, which is positive for the immune system. And as we have the yoga, which also improves the mental health, it will definitely have very superior responses on on overall organization of the immune responses. Unfortunately, no firm understanding of yoga's effect on the immune system and its implication and protection potential available. And this is where I think, as I see that the exercise immunology field is evolving, this field, particularly focusing on the yoga, has to evolve and has to be taken care by the multidisciplinary experts, so that it can actually have the demonstration and the evidence on the positive effect of yoga. Why something which I am very much optimistic here, because there is a huge advancement in the field of human immunology. So we know more than what we were aware of the immune system 2 decades back. We know much more about our whole immune system, and actually that allows to study that immune system in the different conditions, either from yoga, exercise, or pathogens, infections, or even allergies or autoimmune conditions. And as well as the development of the multi-omics approach, now it can actually provide new insight into the impact of yoga on the immune system. So in my suggestion, I will say, in my opinion, if one has to study the impact of yoga on the immune system, the very important aspect is the randomized controlled study design, which is the must to overcome any bias due to the confounding effects. And I think that will be a fantastic the study that can lead to a good outcome, which will be a conclusive outcome to tell a direct effect of yoga on the immune system. So with this, I will just end up giving you the key takeaways from this lecture. So very first takeaway from this lecture is, of course, immune system is the complex organization of organs, cells, and proteins that orchestrate in an extraordinary and balanced manner to act against foreign pathogens. Host immune system plays crucial role in the pathogen pyramid, as we have seen, and of course in the occurrence of the pandemics or the epidemics. There are multiple innate and adaptive immune variants that can protect against infection, that can control the pathogen transmission, that can actually control the pathogen, the potential to cause infection. And strengthening these barriers, the innate and adaptive immune barriers, may definitely provide a timely control of a pathogen and the infection. Something which has been put up by the exercise immunology field is the acute exercise, moderate to vigorous intensity of less than an hour, may serve as an important immune system adjuvant. Of course, this is something which has to be established in case of the country like India and the conditions what we see here for the environmental as well as the demographics. And the randomized controlled human studies are required if one has to understand and demonstrate the beneficial effects of yoga on the immune system. With this, I will like to convey a message which is very important for the pandemic. Is please follow the guidelines of washing your hands nicely, sanitizing the areas, always wearing a mask, and following the social distancing of 6 meters. And of course, something which need to strengthen your immune system, you have to do exercise. It's good for us at this stage. And with this, thanks a lot. Thank you very much for your time and attention. And I'm ready to take your questions now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Nimesh ji, and it is very, very informative and exhaustive. It's more than 1 hour. I really thoroughly enjoyed, and most importantly, an academic presentation. How systematically we have started, and even concluding remarks, and it's a model lecture to all our faculty members. For your information, in this, the general public cannot participate. Earlier, we faced some problems. That's why I will put 1 or 2 questions on behalf of my colleagues or on my own behalf, so that we'll conclude understanding the whole aspects. Yeah, as you mentioned, I have seen you don't recommend very rigorous exercise, because you have shown several studies. For your information, yoga is a yogasana, particularly if you take, it's a particular psychophysiological condition where the body is in a static state, and we maintain the body in a static state, and for particular psychophysiological conditions, even we channelize the breathing, maintenance of the breathing, and also we direct our thought process and emotions. There is a process, it's a very technology. So therefore, this is not exercise, it's a static posture where we maintain some psychophysiological conditions. That's why yoga has found very effective in the management of stress and stress-induced disorders. That's one thing. So that's why the moderate exercise, and definitely yoga is helping. But my question is, yes, sedentary lifestyle, definitely it is not. But will you not recommend the rigorous exercise? I found that even some tennis stars and marathon athletes and other things are also got infected. So in that condition, are they prone for the rigorous exercise? People also prone for such type of infections? That's one question. The second one is, earlier I gone through it is respiratory, the infections through eyes, nose, mouth, even you mentioned genital organs or the skin. So how is it the mouth or the entire metabolic system, how it is going to help the immune system? You have explained, but a little bit of clarity for our students' point of view, because it's a respiratory tract disorders. So we are wearing the mask. Sometime we only wear the mask up to the mouth. We never bothered about the nose or something like that, because you know the breathing problem including us. So that we need to sensitize. This question particularly help our students to understand how the infections affect really in nature and how we can protect ourselves. These are the two.
Sure. So I think what you said is very right, and I agree to that yoga is something which is a very moderate and a very static, the status of the body, and that's why I was actually proposing that part, that we always look into the exercise and we say until now that the moderate exercise is good, but I think in that condition, if we look into yoga, I think it might be having a very kind of superior impact on the immune system, because it has it probably affects the multiple aspects of the immune system at the same time. The question on the rigorous exercise, the heavy exertion. So these studies, what I was showing, were mostly done with the athletes, but mostly done with the marathon runners. And what they have seen is that, of course, in a transient phase, there were few detailed studies which were showing that even the athletes, those who are preparing for the competition in the Olympics, they have multiple level of stress, they have multiple level of sickness, and that's why they are actually affected due to their immune responses even at the static conditions. So this is an important aspect, and that's where the nutritional control of the rigorous exercise came into the field, where they allow that, okay, you have some diets, like one study has shown that if you have the carbohydrates immediately after the rigorous exercise, it actually provides you a metabolic establishment. It actually provides you metabolic stability, and that helps. So this is how the nutrition is connected. But your question on whether the rigorous exercise, these individuals will be more prone to infection, considering these studies, it looks like yes, if you have a rigorous exercise in a transient phase, I will not say in a long term because there is no study available in the long term, but in a transient phase, when your the immune cell counts goes down, when you have more inflammatory cytokines coming into the circulation, when you have more stress hormones coming into the circulation, yes, it's not a positive impact on the immune system, and that may lead to some of the negative consequences. Yes, in a transient phase conditions. To answer your second question on the route of infection by viruses, and giving you an example of this COVID-19, the SARS coronavirus 2. So what happens is that when you have these viruses, through the nasopharynx, through the nasal route, we have the cilia, inside the nasopharynx. Okay, these cilia are like the hairs; they move like this. So any particle which goes in gets cleared by a very speedy ciliary movement, and it allows the clearance of the virus which goes down into the system. However, if you as you say that someone used the mask which is not completely covering the nose, that's not correct. That's the wrong practice, because you are not supposed to only cover your mouth. You actually have to protect the nose, because the virus can go even in the droplets or even in the aerosol form inside the trachea, and through the ciliary process it can actually lead to the lungs, where then it can cause the infection. So the metabolic changes, particularly happening at this stage, there is not much information available that how the metabolic changes are allowing this, but in my understanding, these are more the innate kind of responses which we are dealing with at this stage, when the virus goes inside the nose, and then it is going through the trachea and through the nasopharyngeal and leading to the lungs. And somewhere it starts interacting with the cells even inside the nose, but we have the cells on the epithelial layer. So this is something which is the metabolic part needs to be explored in future. Something which will help to understand how metabolically active individuals are helping in controlling the entry of the virus through this trachea or through this nose. Okay. However, other than that, the understanding on protecting the virus through the aerosol routes, that is something one has to understand, that both the mouth and nose, even the eyes, could be an open source for the virus. So we have to protect at least the nose and the mouth while we are in the crowd. That is something which is important. Yeah.
Thank you. Amrita, would you like to ask? You are a psychologist, and you can ask any question. If you have any question, Vandana. And because only few we are in the main group, others are in the lobby. If you don't have, we'll. Thank you, doctor. There are many, but now the time it's already more than 1.5 hours, and very
Yes.
informative, and definitely in the we'll discuss many things. The project we had taken, yoga practices we developed, which is being practiced by more than 200 million people at present. The protocol, what we propose, and little bit of modifications, what we are going as a yoga for the immune development or something like that. So definitely your valuable suggestions. All these things will take, and definitely will come up with some very interesting outcomes of the project.
Sure.
Thank you. Over to Vandana. Thank you, Dr. Sab. Over
Thank
to
you.
Vandana.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much, Dr. Nimesh Gupta, for such an informative session. You are extremely great for our invitation and delivered such an enlightening lecture on immunity, infection, and pandemic. Thank you so much. यह वेबिनार और व्याख्यान माला मोरारजी देसाई राष्ट्रीय योग संस्थान के निदेशक डॉक्टर ईवी बसवारेड्डी जी की संकल्पना का परिणाम है। इसके लिए मैं उनके प्रति अपना हार्दिक धन्यवाद ज्ञापित करती हूँ। धन्यवाद सर। I would also like to extend my gratitude to Mohammad Tayyib Alam, CNDO MDNIY, our staff members, our technical team for their support in organizing these webinars. In the end, I would like to thank all our listeners for joining us today. Thank you so much. Thank you.